nothing's getting through, so let me spell it out. A, B, C, D, E, F, U.
Hi everyone, this is Haze here. I'm going to show you how I create this really fun painting today of Gayle, and let's get started. So I'll be using the natural sketch brush for the sketching first, and first I'll just sketch in some guidelines for the portrait. So I need a circle for the head and also some lines to show the symmetry of the features first before I start sketching in the features. I had a really tough 20 and 21, so what about you guys? I actually was really inspired by her song, so I decided to do a portrait of her. So actually I've realized something recently, and if you see here I have a red grid of 4x3 rectangles. So if you fit your features within these grids, no matter how you align them, as long as some of the features align within some of the boxes here, your portrait will automatically look a lot more attractive this way. And this also applies if she is looking into the camera or looking sideways, or like for example here she's actually looking upwards. So actually if you just use the 4x3 grid or a 3x3 grid would work as well. You just align it to your features, your portrait will look automatically better. So once the rough sketch is done, I create another layer and then I re-sketch the whole portrait so that I have a neater line sketch. So today's tutorial is all about using two colors to paint. So I'm just picking in the red and also the blue for our two main colors. Then for the last color that we need is the black. Using a pressure sensitive brush, I am going to paint red over the black, and then when I paint lightly I can see that more black is showing, and I'm picking those colors to create the in-between shades between the red and the black. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the blue. So here I have a couple of shades ready for me to pick and paint, and the first step that I would do is to fill in the blacks for the painting. This means that I'll be grouping majority of the dark shapes all into one group of shape, and when you see here you can already see that it already suggests a painting of a girl. Then I'll go ahead and turn on alpha lock for this layer once I am happy with my shape, and then I'll actually pick shades of blue from the palette that I have here. Then I'm going to invert the colors of my sketch layer so that I can see them and paint in the blue tones within the shadow shapes. Once I'm done with the blue side, I'm actually going to pick the dark red and do the other side as well. So it's really important that your initial shape for this dark shadow is really pretty, and you have to actually smudge all the edges out nicely and properly so that when you add in all these tones within these shapes, everything still looks nice and within a single group itself. Once I'm done with the two darker shades, I can pick from the brighter shade and then continue detailing within the groups of shadows here. One of the main reasons why I like this song so much is because it reminded me that I do not have to be afraid of everything. I think that after years of being in the pandemic, I've learned to have this fear of almost everything around me. And here in the painting, I'm progressing to even lighter shades to add in the highlights for these areas itself. So I'm trying to be very careful not to go too light, because let's remember that this is still within a shadow group. So back to the topic of fear, I think that as a female, I've experienced being shut down so often that I've learned not to stand up for myself anymore, and I just pretend that I'm stupid so that it's easier for other people to accept who I am, and I try to hide all the skills and the talents that I have, and I think that that is really very bad. So this song in a way has a huge female empowerment message within it. Okay, now look here at this little patch of hair here. You can see that it's completely different color. So I'm going to use the change color only brush, and I'm going to paint blue over this patch. Then once I feel that I've got the correct color, so I think that this is the correct color, I'm going to pick the color and paint over it using a usual brush. And then I feel that the color should be a bit more greenish or blue, so I'm going to push it to the blue side, and I'm going to pick the color that I think is correct. Again, I'm pressing lightly so that I can paint transparently so that I can get the in-between shades. So now that I am confident with the colors that I have, I'm just going to pick the color and paint the patch in. Now I'm gonna roughly paint in all the highlights within these shadow shapes, and bear in mind that the color shouldn't be very bright because we are still within a shadow shape. So the color should be maybe 60 to 70 cent value. So right now I would be in like step 2. So step 1 would be painting the complete black shape of this shadow mask, and then step 2 would be coloring within this shadow shape itself. So once I have finished coloring every bit and pieces of it with the colors that I want to change, then I consider my job done and I can move on to the next step. Okay, for step 3, in a new layer, I'm picking red and I'm painting beneath the hair layer. So I'm painting in reds for the red side of the face. So what would really make your life easier if you're painting with 2 colors like this is your background should be in the in-between colors. So what's in between red and blue should be purple or pink. So that's why we have a pink color at the back, and this is already like the transition color in between red and blue. So there's a lot less work for us to do when we are working on the transitions later on. Usually if you find a photograph of 2 color lighting like this, the color shapes and the shadow shapes would be a lot messier. Like you can see here in the forehead, it's a bit messy. So it's up to you to simplify them and make them easier to digest to the eyes. And now I pick the blue color and paint the blue side of the face. For some reason, I actually painted the red and the blues on a separate layer like this. So for the blue, I can actually drag it on top and see how it looks like. Now I'm picking the dark red and creating a new layer. So this layer will be the mid-tone shadows. So I'm using this dark red and laying in all the shadows for this mid-tones group of shades. This goes into a separate layer because after this we will actually change the color of these shadows. So the color should change from red to blue, going from left to right. So right now it's just using one color to quickly lay down all the colors first. So now all the shadows has been laid down already, and this layer has to be alpha locked. And now we're going to change the color using the change color only brush. But before that, I'm going to expand the color palette. So I'm going to move the blue shades to one side, and I'm going to fill in the reds going towards the blue. Then I'm going to paint the blue in using light touch so that I can pick the transparent shades and get more in between hues for this palette like this. When the palette is done, I can slowly recolor this layer itself, going from red to blue, from left to right. So I'm gonna pick mostly the purple shades and see where I can fill them in. The changes are really subtle and difficult to see in video because we are only changing the color but not the brightness or darkness of the value itself. So you have to look closely in the screen to see the red patches turning into purples and blues. And for the middle section of the face, which is where the nose and the center of the lips are, those are the trickiest area to paint because these areas have the most color transitions of all, but the value should stay the same. So these areas could be a bit tricky to get the colors right. Essentially, in this step, what we want to do is to get the correct colors and the values for this pass itself. So everything should look correct before you proceed to the next step, which is to use the sketch brush and repaint the entire portrait. So all you have to do is to pick the color from the spot that you're painting, repaint that area itself, and the color that you pick should already be in the correct color and value. So this should all be sorted out in the previous step itself. So now you're just repainting the whole thing to be in the flare and the style that you want. So to recap, the first step, we are sorting out the drawing problem, which is the sketch itself. So once the sketch is sorted out, we won't have any proportion problem or drawing problem. Then we will actually move to the second step, which is the biggest shadow group of all. So this shape itself should already indicate the silhouette of the painting and should also indicate the subject matter itself. So once this is sorted out, which is the value problem, we will actually go in and solve our color problem, which is using the reds and the blues. And once the reds and the blues is done, we will add in our final shadows and solve all the color problems. So right now all the color problems are solved. We only have to solve the last problem, which is painting itself, which is why we are picking the colors that is already on the painting. We want to retain the colors, but we want to repaint them to look better and to look prettier. Here in this step, you can choose any brush that you like to explore, because the type of brush that you choose will actually determine the style of the painting here. So I'm using the sketch brush, which means that everything is going to be very clean cut. They have a lot of edges and it's going to be very geometrical, so it's not a soft look. So if you want a soft look or a more painterly look, you should look for a brush that can express the emotion that you want to express. I think that the song deserves to be represented in a very strong manner, which is why I choose to paint the portrait like this using geometric shapes, and it's very modern, and I think that we should be blessed and grateful that we are in this age and generation where we can talk about feminism and female empowerment. In fact, moving forward into 2022, I think I am going to paint more stronger portraits of females instead of those soft, beautiful looking ones. So we need more representation for the girls who are using the them, they pronouns, and this should be more well represented out there. You can see here I'm painting in the center of the face, which is the lips area, and these areas, like I said before, it's going to be very difficult to paint because it's right where red and blue meets, so there's a lot of transitioning hues and values here, so these parts require a lot of repainting to discover the correct hue that they are in. Once you're about done, you can start to look at the portrait again and see if there's any other areas you can simplify. So when I look at the portrait, I can see that it has a lot of noise and shapes in the forehead area, which is actually an area that shouldn't have so many shapes. So this area itself, I think, needs to be simplified. So I'm going to create a new layer and simplify this area itself and remove most of the shapes here. If I don't like the results, I can always just delete this layer, but I should just try it out first and see if a simplified version would actually bring out the best in the portrait itself or not. For all the alphabet cubes, I am using a 3D model, so I just imported this into Procreate. I can just open up the layers and pick the base layer and start painting on the model itself. So after testing and painting on the cube a couple of times, I roughly figured out how the texturing works for the UVs. So I'm just going to go into the 3D section and show the 2D texture. So this is what I have right now. I'm just going to fill it up with red because I want the borders and the letter itself to be in red. Because the way the UVs are distributed, I can actually paint the base layer right here and it will actually automatically avoid the letter itself. So this actually helped me in texturing the entire cube itself quickly. But the quickest way is still to explore the 2D texture itself, and here I can see that the borders is located on the right side and the letters is on the lower left side. So if I just cover these areas in red, it should give me the result that I want, and I can also shade the base layer itself, and I can just shade it with a brush like this. Once you have figured out the location of the UVs for your 3D objects, it's really easy to texture them in the 2D texture mode instead of in the 3D view itself. So you can see here in the 3D view, everything looks fine already. And I can just go into edit lighting and environment to change the lighting to suit the painting that we were painting before. So the portrait that we were painting has a pink background with a blue and a red light. I'm trying to guess the position of the lights and the colors itself and the intensity. Once I get the intensity that I want, I'm going to go back into the 3D mode and I'm going to take a screenshot of what I have here. So then after that, I'm going to repeat all these steps for every single letter that I have. They are all in different objects, so they have different Procreate files. So I can just go back to the base layer itself and 3 finger slide down to paste in the UV texture from the ones before. And using another layer set to hue mode, I can just change the color of the letters and the borders. So I'm just going to change all the colors for every single letter except for the base color itself. So B gets a green color, and then after that you can see that all the other cubes are all here in my project gallery. I then put in all the screenshots of the cubes into my project here and erase all the backgrounds. Then once they're all ready, I can then place them into the position that I want to take a snapshot of the final artwork. And I've also created an animation in Procreate using all the cubes and made them fall down. So this is what I get at the end.